It's not a, no, she's,
Yes, right.
We're doing the
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
Right,
said
well, it didn't help you had to work this morning.
I was waiting for
Down.
Are you checking the show?
Okay, awesome.
Slow down.
hi, good to see you again.
So you're getting that? We found a spot that
I don't even know if it's one way or the other.
You're better than I am, and I've been here for 19 years.
Friday after work and come back.
Yeah.
so the story gets hard to share.
That's right. You got me thrown.
Yeah, well, and I put on a lot of things.
Still have my training.
But it wasn't, but it also wasn't right? So, I think that we're being budgeted, so they will have a nicer refrigerator than the ones that we have here, different applications.
Still, I think.
But it's a big long contract, so maybe.
I just don't want to hassle with.
You doing good
Today, yeah.
today? Or did you have?
No. I was at the task force meeting yesterday.
Yeah.
8 a.m. That's every day I do. The night before, in the late evening, we went out. We had some clams and seafood. I think that did it. Some kind of a food poisoning. God damn it! I was sick still. Yeah, but it's just a kind of a one-time thing.
Yeah.
After like 10-15 hours, everything.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like coming, or no, should I get up and call because at 8 a.m.
Oh, yeah. It's really hard to call in.
And my wife was at work already. She's a nurse, so I decided, wow, just screw the whole thing today. And then, but in the afternoon, I was already just fine.
So maybe, hopefully, it's
In
just
the
a
afternoon, I cleaned my whole system with 2 glasses of wine.
That's good.
Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. Acknowledge Commissioner McDonald on the phone. We hope.
Present.
Thank you. Call for a motion and second to grant leaves of absence to Commissioners Levy and O'Halloran who are out of town.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll call for a motion and second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of May 8th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Curtis, if you could give us the executive director's report.
That's great. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start the day rather than with Stan. Sorry, Stan, you're getting bumped by the new CFO. I want to point out and welcome our new CFO, Dion Denson, who's here. She just started this week, so we're trying to keep the pressure light today. But Dion joined us from the Georgia Department of Public Health, where she was CFO and Deputy Commissioner. She wowed the socks off of our executive team and our finance team in the search process. And as you know, this was a really important hire for us. We have a lot of strategic elements in the next couple of years in particular that are really existential for the port. And we're really excited to have Dion here to take those on and to join our executive team. So I hope you'll all get a chance to say hi to Dion today and in the months ahead, but we're just thrilled. So welcome, Dion. Stan, if you would, I'd like to first draw everyone's attention up here to our safety champions this month. Again, nicely distributed across the port. Just a really good indication of folks who are taking the lead on safety inside the port family. Stan, if you'd share a safety moment with us this morning.
Yep. My message today is on June's National Safety Month campaign and how we are using it to influence our employees and families to think of at least one change that they can make to improve their safety this June. This month, the Port of Portland is exercising our membership again with the National Safety Council by promoting and engaging in the National Safety Month campaign. Observed annually in June, National Safety Month focuses on reducing leading causes of injury and death at work, at home, at play, and on our way. Every 3 minutes, someone dies from something that is 100% preventable. National Safety Month is a call to action to reverse this trend. Utilizing employee involvement through our safety committees, we are providing safety resources, highlighting a different topic each week in June, and encouraging employees to bring safety home as well. So in week 1 of the month, it's on hazard recognition. Hazards are everywhere. Was there a slide, Steve? There we go. So week 1 is on hazard recognition. Hazards are everywhere. We're asking all Port of Portland employees to report hazards or near miss incidents through our tracked reporting and closure process. The Port of Portland is building capacity to have safety conversations to continuously improve our employees' health and operational excellence. Week 2 is on falls, which happens to be the #1 office safety hazard. So we're asking people to watch out for slipping and tripping dangers, and distracted walking is more dangerous than you think. Week 3 is on fatigue. 70 million Americans suffer from sleep disorders, and others struggle with sleep quality. Maybe you do. So some of the Portland's business lines are working on fatigue management plans during this month. And week 4 is on impairment, and no level of impairment is safe. Driving is the most dangerous activity most of us do, so I always ask people to wear their seat belts. And we are approaching the peak season of driving, which happens to peak during the week of the 4th of July. So be aware. So 3 people will have died from preventable causes in the 10 minutes since the start of this commission meeting. So don't let your loved ones become a statistic. The mission of the National Safety Council is to eliminate preventable deaths at work, in homes, in communities, and on the road through leadership, research, education, and advocacy. Through our membership, I invite employees to share the facts, the tip sheets we provide, and the mitigation tools with your families to ensure no one gets hurt this June or throughout the year.
Terrific. Thank you, Stan. Appreciate it. By way of updates, commissioners, let me start with the airport. Just after, it must have been the Friday after the last commission meeting, we did indeed from the U.S. Department of Transportation get the notification about Haneda. sent out an email on that, but just wanted to share with everyone that indeed we will be shifting our flight that is currently to Narita to Haneda in Tokyo. Thanks to all of you and staff and partners who really helped advocate for that shift. We think it's likely in a year that will take place, but a really important shift for us, and it brings you about an hour closer to downtown Tokyo. So just a really significant move for us. Second, Cathay Pacific Cargo Service is up to 6 flights a week this month, so that we're really starting to see that ramp up. You'll recall that when these flights started a couple years ago, it was 2 a week, and then it got to 3 and 4, and so that we're to 6 is really an indication of the success of that flight, both the base cargo and the ag products, especially in the summer, the cherries and the berries and the Dungeness crab that are Asia bound. So really excited about that. We are, as I noticed, a couple floors closed in the garage this morning. We are gearing up for summer travel. This is when it really starts to pop. We expect between June and August 5.9 million passengers through the airport. So this is really where we get our peak numbers through the next couple months. And the operations team is really focused on making sure we can do everything we can to keep that experience really high quality, but also safe and fast. So brace yourself. And then finally, on the airport side, Southwest Airlines celebrated last week 25 years at PDX, now in the sort of mid-40s number of flights. It started with 4 flights 25 years ago. We could do a little blast from the past about what you were doing in 1994, but probably we just best leave that alone. They've been great partners of ours, and they're also now really getting excited about moving out to Concourse E. As we see that all come together by the end of next summer, they'll be over there. On PDX Next, as noted on Concourse E, you can see it really now coming together. I was lucky enough to have a tour last week with Stan. We got to see the pieces coming together from the inside. And, you know, when you look at it as a slab of concrete, it doesn't seem that large. But when you're inside, it's pretty vast. 600 feet. I think the construction lead told us it is, what was it, 20 stories taller than the U.S. Bank Tower if you put it on its end. So it's a pretty big building and very exciting. You'll hear a little bit more later this morning about the art plans in Concourse E. Jacob Hashimoto, who has been selected, it's pretty exciting, and really look forward to talking more about that in the months ahead. On Marine and Industrial, we were waiting for and excited to get our first check from the Portland Diamond Project. Indeed, for the month of June, we shifted to a month-to-month payment schedule for that option that is to last 6 months. The first check did come in, and so we're excited to continue working with them on whether there's a future for them at T2 or not. We did release at Gresham Vista an RFQ, essentially the last large plot of property out at Gresham Vista we call Lot 5, large enough that we'd like to get some help in developing that site, again, with this focus on quality jobs. Responses are due in August 23rd. It's a really exciting opportunity for us to sort of put into practice this shift to high quality jobs instead of the older, larger logistics facilities that have filled many of our properties. And then finally, we've purchased NRD, natural resource damage credits. We're about, I guess, can I say how close to our goal? We've gone substantially toward meeting our goal. That's me not declaring how many we purchased or what they're worth. This is, you'll remember, on the Superfund project, we have an obligation both on cleanup and for mitigation on the damage that was done. And this is that damage portion. Really excited about moving forward in that process. So with that, Madam President, I will conclude my report.
Call for a motion and second to accept the Executive Director's report. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Okay. I'll call on Kristen Leonard, who will introduce Jeff Raker and Scott Drum.
Great. Good morning. And once again, I'm going to stay here to do my introduction to save room for our guests. We are always looking for opportunities to bring outside thought leaders that we've had the opportunity to work with and learn from, and I'm really excited about the presentation this morning. This is a presentation about a brand new decision support tool that Metro has created. It's called the Economic Value Atlas. The intent of the atlas is to align planning and investment decisions with desired outcomes, such as creating communities with access to family wage jobs, building opportunities for all. We've talked a lot about what can we be doing to really create economic opportunity in our communities. And Scott Drum, our research director, will introduce our guest speaker on this topic. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to have Jeff with us today. Jeff is an economic development planner at Metro and has overseen the development of the Economic Value Atlas. The Atlas creates a data picture, if you will, of the region and provides something that we haven't had before to really better understand the economy and the communities here within the region. It is a very unique way to look at our economic conditions, our economic values, and understand how there's an interconnection between people, place, and economy. And it's also not just about the data. I think it encourages users to think differently about the region and to think differently about those interconnections. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jeff. I will say, though, it's a brand new tool. We haven't yet had a chance to apply it to our work, but we certainly will, and it's something that can help us understand the communities that surround our facilities and our industrial parks. Jeff?
Great. Thanks, Scott, and thanks, commissioners and Director Robinhold. I wanted to start by saying that planners really like to think that we do a good job of aligning transportation and land use to advance community development. But that is never going to be effective in bringing about the placemaking and supporting our communities in the way we'd like to without aligning that with efforts to address economic and workforce development. It certainly doesn't address the hollowing out of the middle class. It certainly doesn't address wage differences between racial demographics. It doesn't address issues where capital might be unable to be accessed by certain businesses. So a lot of this effort by Metro recently is a recognition that a stronger alignment is needed between what we do in community development and what others are doing in economic and workforce development. This project, as well as some future work that I'll be briefly describing, is kind of coming out of that sentiment and that intention. I'm Jeff Raker. I'm an economic development planner, came from the Puget Sound area where a similar alignment occurred between those working on the regional economic strategy and those working on the transportation and land use planning functions at Puget Sound Regional Council. And I see some opportunities to bring about similarly some cross-pollination between the two. So a lot of this is obviously exploring the future of our regional economy, understanding a little bit more effectively how we're using our land today and what we expect from the economy to look like, understanding the disruptions and economic trends that might change those expectations, even if they're known unknowns, like the range of impact of automation or climate change. And then trying to address what we can test now in the form of, say, site level work, and how we can advance a more strategic approach. The Economic Value Atlas starts to do the first, and then the intention is to work through additional work to chart a new approach that aligns the two. So a lot of this is trying to get at what's the role of different areas in the region's economy. From my Puget Sound example, they've done an inventory of industrial land supply and kind of assigned remaining the flexibility of our industrial lands, but identifying what's the key strength of that area that we can leverage. Is it core industrial land supply? Is there kind of a mix? That is something that is a little bit lacking here in that we have Title IV, which is largely a catch-all for a lot of different economic activity. So obviously a lot of this is trying to say, okay, what's the workforce arrangements into particular areas? What's the supply chain and firm-to-firm relationships? Are we creating a business climate that's strong, and what's happening in terms of the local market? And then how do these economic disruptions, such as automation and e-commerce and micro-scale manufacturing changes and the gig economy, change the way we look at our use of land for economic activity? And so that's a lot of what this project's about. And then advancing further, what sites or policies can we test to set a new path forward? So is it retooling some of the retail development out there? Is it scaling up and leveraging the makers culture that we have and ensuring that they have access to business assistance and export potential? Is it capitalizing on specific geographies such as our innovation quadrants? And then finally, what sites or policies can we test to set a new path forward? So is it revisiting industrial employment sort of land approach within our Title IV lands, building and leveraging new tools for site readiness? A lot of work is going into that, and Metro has recently funded the port to do a site readiness toolkit you might have heard of from Liz Glancy. And we're doing other work similar to that. And then additionally, just working with partners to potentially, try to find out, are there particular areas of this region, what are their different strengths and opportunities and potential pitfalls that we need to address when it comes to the economy? So the Economic Value Atlas is the tagline is, it's a collaborative project aligning planning and economic development to build agreement on investments to strengthen our regional economy. And essentially, it serves as that basis for this longer-term effort where we're going to be planning for the future economy as part of a refresh of our growth concept 2040, which is the growth plan for the region. And it'll be, we're starting to explore what that refresh might look like by first looking at economic issues. So with that, I'll turn it over to the demo of the tool itself. So this is a tool that as Scott was indicating, provides a data picture of what's going on in the economy based on a set of economic values framed by business, people, and place. And under each of those, it obviously it ties to the framework that Greater Portland Inc. has in their regional economic strategy. But under business, it's more about, okay, is there job growth? Are we making strong connections to market? Are we growing target industries that are dynamic? And is there access to labor? So it's more business focused. The other is more about economic justice, inclusivity. Are we leveraging the diversity of our communities in bringing about innovation and supporting those businesses and workers? And are we providing job access? And then place, finally, is about, is the area developable? Is it a livable space, and is there strong market activity, and how affordable is it? So usually when I go through this, I give you a scenario and I pretend I am currently a business wanting to locate to the region, and that business is interested in this case, entry-level workers. So let's look at workers without a BA within a 30-minute commute. We're also interested in identifying whether the average travel time in and out of the region, so this is from any census tract to the exit and entry points of the major highway system, the travel time. You start to identify sort of those concentrations. And what I've done there is stacked variables this was done in support of Brookings Institution, which they did most of the methodology behind the work. And then our data team put together the development tool. But it's stacking variables so you can see what the average tract is in the region and how each census tract compares. So you're looking at how well connected a particular tract is to the exit and entry points of the highway system, as well as how accessible an entry-level workforce is from that area. You can do the same by adding in PDX Airport. You start to see the shift to the east in terms of accessibility to the airport. And so let's go back to my example of a business seeking to locate here. So they're interested in market connectivity in and out of the region, entry-level workforce accessibility, but they're also interested in whether there is a good base of existing industrial and commercial space, as well as buildable land for expansion. And you start to see that the Columbia Corridor shows up pretty intensively, certain areas within Gresham and the downtown area, as well as down further into the East County to the south near Happy Valley. So there's some interesting things that show up, and it's just of note that FedEx and Amazon located their mega warehouses in these areas where they express these values. Now let's take it from a different tact and look at it as if we're a different type of industry. We're interested in high skill labor, those with a BA or above within 30 minutes. Oops, sorry. Those with a BA or above within 30 minutes. We're also interested in the base of industrial and commercial space, of square footage, but we want to poach from other similar industries and say we're a software company. You start to see the Emerald Crescent show up, as well as more centralized areas pop out as those that are expressing those particular interests of that industry. Then, if we shift it much different tact, now we're looking at this from an economic justice perspective. So, let's look at those areas that are experiencing poverty. Now you're looking at the light areas of interest, whether there's a large gap between low and income earners, and whether it's getting better or not. And these are those areas that are expressing a lack of economic inclusion. This particular tract, if you zoom in, you can get the actual data. So poverty in this tract is 44.6% relative to the average tract in the region, which is 13. Inequality is higher, and boy, it's not getting better. Median income's going down dramatically. So it gives you a tool to kind of identify how different variables of economic injustice or economic struggle are stacking in particular areas. We can also look at that in terms of adding in demographic information, for instance, people of color, and see how they're experiencing that situation as well. Clearly, this is in beta form, where there's a lot to be worked out with this effort, but we are kind of enthusiastic about this being a tool that will be growing into something that can support the economic development professionals, can support our own work as we consider transportation investment, as well as start to bring about a more intentional approach to using our land use assets as a tool for inclusive economic development. With that, I'll turn it over to questions.
I guess I have a question about data and how it went in. Obviously, there are a number of lenses that can be overlaid on each other, and that's the value here. But for example, with respect to livability, how's that determined, and particularly with respect to people who might not be necessarily always included in data gathering?
Certainly. So you can look at livability and then provide the context for different populations and whether they're experiencing heightened livability. In this case, we've used transit access to jobs, walkability, and vehicle access as measures. Those are ones that were determined by a technical group, as well as the task force that supported this work. The report was included in that, as well as a variety of organizations, and I can provide more detail. But so, for instance, you can look at the livability factors we have included here and then overlay that with a different demographic group to identify what is occurring for that demographic group, or at least give some indication. It's not precise, obviously.
Okay. I was curious as to whether or not any of the data sets here include the, maybe, I'm not sure what the number is within the region, but I think statewide the governor has designated about 25 opportunity zones. Mm-hmm. Are they reflected here as well?
Certainly. So under planning, you can then use this to look at opportunity zones, as well as the the enterprise zones, and if it'll come up, there it is, as well as our employment and industrial lands, to give yourself some context in terms of our sort of approach to economic investment. So it does give you that context, and you can identify an individual tract, and then see, if I click on all values, for instance, and I can look at an individual tract, you can see that the job activity, this is the tiger triangle where there is an opportunity zone and an enterprise zone. Job activity is stronger than the average tract in the region. Market connectivity is relatively in line, et cetera. So you have a sense of what that tract has in terms of existing sort of condition. And you can look at it in different ways and look at the actual data lower down as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Just quick one. A few slides back, you talked about the certain areas in terms of economic viability, or say the median income, either decreased or increased this and that. Certain areas of 37% minus instead of increasing. Did you not say that a few slides back, right? And my question is relative to that. What kinds of data did you rely upon to come up with that conclusion? And how reliable are those data?
Fair enough.
And my question, another one is over what period of time would that 30 whatever percent, compared to other areas, which is a plus 10% of this and that. And so those are two questions.
This is where we design the tool so that it's good for replication so that we can continue to do this work. It largely relies on public data that we'll be able to have again and again and again, as well as proprietary data that we always purchase on a regular basis at Metro. In general, there's a snapshot for the latest year available. In most cases, that was 2016. And then a 10-year trend is the general. If there is trend information, it's 10 years. Yeah, but largely public data. So specific. Can I?
Yeah. So what does public data? What do they include?
Census data, our own Bureau of Land Management, our own buildable land inventory. There's a variety of other CEW data. And then instead of ES202, we have jobs data that's from what is included in Esri Business Analyst, which is InfoUSA. We have access to a variety of things. And what the advantage of this is we can always very simply add in additional variables, make adjustments. And the intention is, obviously, this is not that approachable a tool currently. And we want to build it out on a particular topical sort of modules that are easier to navigate, even for the public. So we've had the rule there. It's 30-second, 3-minute, 30-minute, and 30-hour. This is closer to the 30-hour version, so you're looking at the wonky version. But if you want to dive in on the actual data sources, perhaps I can follow up with you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Vince, I'll call on you to introduce the next general discussion item, please.
I think I'll follow Kristen's lead and stay here and invite Mark Clark and Kelly Sweeney up here to update you on the past year's activities of the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee, or CNAC. This group has been together for quite a long time, and what they do is assist us on noise-related issues around the airports. Noise is a complicated issue. We don't own or control a lot of the space, but we certainly are, as the proprietors of the airport, very much involved in it. So Mark has been on CNAC for the past 8 years and was reelected to the chair in March of 2016, and Kelly has been on there for 11 years and was reelected to the vice chair in March of 2016 as well. So we really appreciate their time and efforts, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Kelly for their report.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to address you. It is a part of our charter that you have authorized that we do come before you once a year. We have to admit last year you didn't see us, which you probably didn't miss us, but that's okay. It just kind of fell out because of all of the activities that we had going on last year as far as noise is concerned. Kelly Sweeney is here. I'd also like to introduce Mike Ye back here, if he raises his hand. And we have John Bazeski, he's a new member. And we have Mike Finch. And we have the noise office representatives, Phil Stenstrom and Jerry Gerspach. So first of all, I'd like to say we love our group. We all get along very well, and that's a good thing. The other part is that our job is to listen to our citizens, and we do that obviously with the help of the staff. But we look forward to our meetings. You would think that we wouldn't, because basically this is a complaint department, and but be it as so, we really look forward to doing anything that we can to give good credit to the airport and to the citizens so that they match as far as that's concerned. So we've got some slides, and if we could move on. I don't know if this clicker works for us or not, but does it? Oh, okay. Oh, you got it. Whoops, back up. I'm messing it up.
There we go. First, two things that are obvious. Other than my general good looks, you'll notice that I have a movement disorder. I have Parkinson's disease. And so I apologize for my tremor, but I can't help it. So we also like our martinis shaken, not stirred. We have a real diverse group in our environment, from doctors to commercial pilots to a noise audiologist or an audiologist. So a wide dispersion of capabilities that are brought to the committee. We're represented the 15-member committee is made up of 4 at-large members that are appointed by the Port of Portland, and the 11 other jurisdictional bodies around the city, including Vancouver and Clark County. So we make sure out to Washington County and down into Clackamas County. So we make sure that we've got the area covered. And you may or may not be surprised with the number of complaints we get from both down in Clackamas County and over in above the lake in Vancouver, just due to the flight patterns, which we'll get to in just a second. So I think you can be proud, as we are, of the abilities and the dispersion of the people that we brought on the committee.
So we were formed in 1998. I hate to read slides. And as it was also pointed out, that we're your oldest committee that I'm aware of. We did transfer from, it was renamed in 1998. Well, yeah, it's a successor, I guess, from 1984. From what I've gathered, going on the noise symposiums, the international noise symposiums, we're one of the oldest. You can take your hats off for that the Port of Portland was so adept back then when jets were noisier. They flew lower. You can go into the history of all of that. It's all swarming up in here, but it's not really formulating very well. But when we go to these meetings, we're immediately attacked in the way, how did you do all of this? How did you get to where you are? And yet I myself stand on the shoulder of giants, of those way ahead of me that were there, that built all of this. And because airports like New York, and I probably shouldn't name names, but New York and some other larger ones, much larger, do not offer any kind of assistance along the lines of a noise group like we have here in Portland. So, hats off to everyone for putting that together back then, because it is voluntary. That's the other part. So we can move on to the next slide.
So Mark started out where our biggest job is to listen, but there's 2 things that we do. We try to limit and impact the noise output that the airport generates, and we try to understand the physical and environmental impacts of the noise to our communities and represent both. So it's an interesting position to be in, to both represent the citizens and try to represent the best interest of the port and the business communities and everything else that the airport brings to the environment. So ours is a real balanced scale, and it gets heavily loaded at one time or another, but all in all, it's a pretty balanced environment.
So our slide up here, oh, nice. It shows that John Pileski and Lydia has joined us just recently. And I guess the big picture is that noise complaints are down. The number of single users that call in frequently is up. So we actually kind of divide those up so that we can kind of get through to find out if there's any new actions that we need to take. I'm not saying that old complaints are bad news. It's just that if they're already there, then we acknowledge them and we work through that, and try to develop ways to reduce that if there is a way to do that. The other thing that the port allowed us to do was to support the school bus to the Air National Guard base for their STEM program for noise-impacted schools. And this has been very successful. I've actually been out there one time with them and saw the impact of that, and it's just tremendous. And then we also get letters from the school, the teachers and things like that appreciate the fact that the port helps and supports that. Our collaboration with Air National Guard can't go without saying that they are noisy, but they are prudent in all of their operations. As we understand it, each one of their pilots goes through a tremendous amount of educational process of slide presentations and stuff in the number of hundreds to understand how important it is for them to be as quiet as possible, even though that their operations really don't allow for it. They do really, really well. That's, many people in Portland love it though, and then there's those that don't. So we get all of the different perspectives of what that noise represents.
Can I add one more thing, Mark? There's the Orang does a really nice job for us in terms of transit aircraft. You guys will see the F-18s parked over on the Flightcraft or the old Flightcraft ramp, but they do a real good job with the bases around the Northwest, helping them understand that we do have a noise abatement procedure, and please follow the rules that the Guard has set up for the military.
So we have, you can see there's a number of permanent noise monitors that are around the airport area. And these are what gather the information of the noise itself, and then it's translated to each aircraft as it's coming in. When a complaint comes in, then Jerry in the noise office can go through and disseminate if there was something that was an anomaly along those lines. So this is our complaint locations for 2018. And you can see they're scattered all over, and I think there's even some outside of this, but this gives us the impact of the areas that, as you can see here. Next slide, please. Yeah. Did you want to tell them? You want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay.
This was yours.
Yeah, it really was. Okay. So on my left, you'll see how the flights used to travel through coming in. These are all landing, by the way, which is the majority of all the complaints that we get from the noise office that we get are from landing, not takeoffs. That's really something that's important to know. But you can see they're scattered all over as they're coming in on that over there. Currently, we're operating in the next section over, and this is called precision-based navigation, and it's being satellite controlled as far as the aircraft is, all the way up to the last point of entry. Where we're going to end up getting to is the bottom right hand, where that's going to be brought in very precision, and this is where in some cities there is complaints along those directly below that. To combat that, aircraft have been really improved in many ways. And if we can move on to the next slide.
So first of all, I want to make sure and give a commercial to the noise office. Phil and his team do an exemplary job of supplying us with data. This one snapshot is not a picture of the county and the city's latest rock improvement area for homeless camps. These are areas where noise complaints come from. You'll see it was complaint in 2014, 3,590. Let's go, if we can go to the next slide, which is 2015. You notice the transitory nature of the way the complaints come in. If you can move, the complaints are down to 688. If you go to the next year, 2016, you can see again the movement of the complaints because winds change. We have a west flow and an east flow, as you guys are probably aware, during summer or winter, and the complaints flow with the wind. And so we're doing, again, it popped up a little bit to 1,137 in 2016. Then we got to 2017 where we were working with Orang to do a continuous descent approach, which is a particular maneuver that they have to practice when they're in a hostile environment. And it's caused us a lot of meeting time and a lot of neighborhood meeting time and a lot of discussions with Orang. And the FAA got involved. The Port Noise Office led the charge here in terms of trying to understand the best, safest, and most efficient way for the Guard to be able to practice what they do. So complaints popped back up, but I think through the work of the guys sitting behind us, and Mark's work and the committee's work, we were able to diffuse a lot of the complaints to a point of rationality. And it's at a pretty steady state area, but the guard's going to be here. They signed a lease with the port a year ago, and we had to find a way to minimize their impact, yet let them do their training that was required. So a lot of this stuff was above our pay grade. Got the governor's attention, and it's certainly the city council of Portland, but I think we found some amicable solutions that if you guys have any more questions, Mr. Phil Stenstrom is your guy.
So I would also like to point out, though, that the overhead continuous descent approach is actually something that people in the on the further points of our city, not right directly in the airport, are actually happier with this. So there is a give and take with this, and so and the ORANG has actually agreed to do that. We had 4 ships coming in, 4 aircraft coming in at one point. The people in Cully District and right where you see the darkest area there asked us if we could break that up to make it go back to the 2 ship and then land those 2 and then bring another set in a little bit later. Don't have them all come in at once. And even though they kind of protested about it, they said they agreed to do that. So it's a beautiful relationship along those lines. There are people that are going to complain no matter what. And we listen to that. But overall, though, I think that there's about 180,000 people that are much happier with them flying in higher and quieter as they approach the airport. And it's a different kind of noise that the aircraft makes when it makes a landing, with very little power, and it swoops in and around. And believe it or not, they're pulling about 6 Gs when they do this maneuver, and it's something that they are required to do as part of their job. And they'd love to be able to do it here at home. A lot of people would prefer that they go do it at somewhere else other than Portland, but they do indeed need to practice this. Very important. Next slide.
And you can go on to the next slide, please. One of the biggest benefits for us is the aircraft manufacturers and engine manufacturers. You can see top to bottom from an old 737-100, which are, I don't believe, too many left in flight, down to the newest iteration minus the 900 issues. But the noise profile of the airplanes has decreased substantially. And so that's helped us in terms of our mission and aspect in terms of dealing with the public. Next slide, please. One of the things we all do is outreach, and the port does a really exemplary job of getting out into the neighborhoods, and we try to associate ourselves with them as often as possible. But we do our own missions in terms of going to neighborhood meetings as well. We all represent our own jurisdictions and are involved in that. But the port, it's a budgeted item, and you guys have got to commend the port for the amount of money that they allow the noise office to spend to go out and do community outreach and explain what's going on from the noise footprint of this environment.
Next slide.
So coming up, we're working with one of the larger complaints now is there's what used to be the drug interdiction 172 and 182. They now moved over to, because it's mostly the marijuana things are legal. They changed their mission to do more crime fighting, and it's turned out to be a real benefit for the city of Portland's police bureau and the counties. So we'll continue to work with the police unit. They now send the captain or the sergeant to our meetings once a month, or once every other month. We'll continue to monitor the Fly Quiet program, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And we will continue, and ORANG always has a seat at our table, and the command leadership across the field is always there to help us, and vice versa. We will continue to do the community outreach, which has been our mainstay and our foundation. As Mark again reiterated, other than the two of us sitting here today, we try to listen more than we talk. And because we're the constituents that represent our neighborhoods, and we try to make sure that they're represented in this type of environment. And we are always open to serve those things that better employ the strategies that we're trying to envelop. And we would appreciate any feedback that you guys hear from your neighborhoods. Send it to us, please, and we'd like to jump on it.
As a summary for this, we want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss openly the noise committee, and want to thank you again for allowing us to operate under the umbrella. So I think we've wasted we're not wasted. We've spent our 15 minutes here or overextended it. So I appreciate your time. We appreciate your time. And I want to thank everyone on our committee for coming, and we appreciate it. So any questions?
Thank you very much, and thank you as well to the other members of the committee. We know this is hard work. As you said, it's a complaint department, and clearly you're doing a good professional job that really engages the port and the community in a way that we need to continue. So thank you for that. Any questions?
Okay.
Please.
Thank
Madam
you.
President, this is
Oops.
Pat McDonald. I
Go ahead. The late.
have a question.
Please go ahead,
I
Commissioner
wanted
McDonald.
to say, first of all, thank you for your report and the impressive accomplishments. I was wondering, what has surprised you lately from the citizens' input, and what would you advise us as a commission or as a commission to be aware of going forward?
I didn't hear the one most important.
What has surprised you?
Okay, with the overhead continuous descent, I thought that would be something that would be very happily brought in because the aircraft are quieter as far as coming in on engine noise. So I was really surprised that there was that many number of people that were against the airplane noise coming off of its wings as it turns. It's just, I've had a lot of people contact me and tell me that they actually would run outside and watch it and wonder over the beautiful maneuver that they're making. And they weren't displeased with the noise at all. Yet at the same time, you hear in their voice that they said that they ran outside to hear it and to watch it. It's more of a sight thing. And they could definitely tell the difference between the two. So I think, noise and sound are two different things. And I know but really they're not. Noise is something that we don't want to hear, and sound is something we do. And, whether you like rap music or country western, it depends on, one of them is noise in a lot of people's minds. It's getting more and more mashed together, but that's how I like to describe it as far as that's concerned. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I thank you very much. It was very educational and important work the committee does. We appreciate that very much. Two questions. In terms of your function, I think I see two areas of function. A, actually dealing with the noise itself and trying to reduce that to the extent possible. Another area would be to enhance and outreach programs, and explain and diffuse the complaints that you used. So that second area, I understand the first one, in terms of actual reduction of the noise out there in the past 10 years or so of this particular committee. In your memory or in anybody's, what are the most impactful three recommendations the committee has made relative to reducing the noise?
The probably the biggest impact was what we refer to as the box haulers, the guys that feed FedEx and UPS, and the box haulers, the smaller aircraft across the field that feed FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service. We had a community group in Concordia that suggested, is there a way that those aircraft could not land on the crosswind runway in the evening? We took the request from the neighborhood, took it to the noise office. They took it to the FAA. Voluntarily, the FAA now restricts those landings after 10 p.m. and sends them around to the parallel runways instead of coming across the city and through Concordia and down into the crosswind runway. So we took the community input on a volunteer basis. The FAA has worked with us to make that happen. So the box hauler incidences have dropped dramatically. We still get complaints early in the morning because those guys started departing here at 5 a.m. So we've worked diligently with the companies and the FAA specifically that really helped out, again, on a volunteer basis because the rules, they don't have to. But the box haulers themselves and the FAA and the port's noise leadership helped us to alleviate that big noise issue at night.
And then the other item would be the GRE, or is the ground engine run-up, where they'll do test engines and things like that. That has actually turned out to be a good thing as far as a place where they can set the aircraft inside and then put them in and basically lock them down, and then they put them in full thrust mode, and then they can test the engines and work out any details that they have. And that was very negatively thought of as something to bring here to the airport, but it's actually turned out to be a very positive thing, because the number of people now that bring their jets here for service and maintenance had gone up, and it hasn't impacted the area. There was a request a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, that was being utilized so much that they were hoping that they could use another part of the airport and to expand on that slightly. And we said that would be fine. That we let us know when you're going to do it, and and we'll monitor this to see if it's going to be a big impact. It was going to be closer to the river as far as where they were going to do this, and they never did do it. So obviously they were able to get their schedules around to where they could do this maintenance without it. And you're looking for a third thing.
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be a 3? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Very much, and thank you for coming. We hope we won't miss you next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, does any commissioner want a presentation on the consent items? And I'll read their titles. Revision of Commission Policy Number 6.2.01 concerning appointment and duties of assistant treasurers, authorization and designation of assistant treasurers, or appointment and designation of assistant secretaries. All right. I'll call for a motion and second for approval of the consent items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Vince, if you could introduce the first agenda item, please.
So the first item we have is a procurement for a fire truck, fire engine. And so rather than me doing my normal introduction, I'm going to have Chief Funk go through and talk a little bit about the fire department, how we use the equipment, and then Brian Francis will go through the actual procurement process and give the chief an opportunity to talk a little bit about the fire department.
Thanks, Vince. And good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. We are here to seek approval to award a procurement contract to Hughes Fire Equipment Incorporated for one fire engine in the amount of $843,657. And next slide, please. So what we are replacing is the current engine 80 you see there. It's a 2008 Pierce engine. It runs 1,188 calls, at least in 2018 it did. So it's a fairly busy unit. It's by the time we get it replaced, it'll be 12 years old, which is right in pace with where we like to replace apparatus per the National Fire Protection Association recommendations on it. Then as you see, we carry them another 12 years in a reserve status, at which point we start looking at them as sort of end of life at that point. The primary mission of the engine, we carry a lot of different apparatus that we use here, but the engine itself is a structural engine. It's primary for structural firefighting and EMS, so it carries either basic EMTs, but most of the time it carries also paramedics and does advanced life support as a backup unit to our rescue that is a full-time paramedic unit. One of the other things we use it for that you've probably seen in the news a lot recently is out on wildland deployments. Last summer we did 4 deployments with this engine, 2 in California. We did Paradise, we did Mendocino, and we did 2 deployments in the state of Oregon. It really underscores the importance of reliability of apparatus for us. In the east of the Dalles, you might remember the wheat fire that started that resulted in the fatality of a civilian. Multnomah County Task Force had a very close call there, this engine being one of them, and our crews, and had to rapidly evacuate an area that blew up, as the term is used. The wildfire blew up, and their ability to jump in that rig and quickly evacuate the area was key to their safety. We're very supportive of moving our apparatus at the appropriate time. And then what happens is to engine 80 here, when we get the new engine in place, and it would go into reserve status, as I mentioned, but it also replaces a 1996 reserve engine that is nearing its end of life. And next slide, please. So what are we buying? This is a similar apparatus to what we are proposing to purchase. This is a Pierce Enforcer 1500 gallon per minute engine. You'll have to use your imagination. Ours will be in the traditional green for the airport with the black top as opposed to the red, but otherwise a very similar apparatus. What are we getting for the money? First of all, we're getting increased reliability, as I mentioned before. But also, just like cars, fire apparatus evolve, and in the last 12 years, like cars, they've evolved very rapidly as far as features that are available on them. So already our existing engine looks somewhat dated. And so the things I'm really interested in as a fire chief that are coming with this engine are things like the rollover protection. It's going to have more enhanced airbags. So we have a few airbags on the current engine, but we're going to get side curtain airbags and things like that that help protect firefighters. We're going to get camera vision so we can see all the way around the apparatus, which again speaks right back to safety. Increased visibility built into the design of the windows. And something that you wouldn't think is really important, but it has lower hose beds on it. So where we store our hose in the back, our current engine has a very high hose bed, unusually high, I would say. And so what that causes is the firefighter to have to step up on the tailboard and grab hose up over their head and try to pull that off and then step off backwards. And it's just not a good scenario. So purposely we spec'd this current engine with a much lower hose bed to help mitigate that issue. And then lastly, there's an improved fuel efficiency with the new engine to be gained. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good morning, Commissioners. This procurement contract is being done through a cooperative purchase with the HGAC buy, which the port is a member of. With commission action today, it will take approximately 1 year to build and receive the fire truck. The majority of that time is spent waiting in the queue for the manufacturer. The actual build time is approximately 14 weeks. Once we receive the fire engine, it will take some time to prepare it and load it with equipment, and we expect that it'll go into service probably Q3 of 2020. The Hughes Fire contract for the fire engine is approximately $843,000. The port staff and contracted services is a little over $154,000. The majority of that is port staff time in developing specifications and travel to the factory for final inspection. The contracted services will be primarily for outfit of radios or a few items once it is received here at the airport. The hose and tools and radios are all the equipment that we still have to purchase to load onto the fire truck, which also includes all the EMS equipment as well, and that is approximately $300,000. The contingency for the project overall is $65,000, which we feel is appropriate given where we're at in this project, with a total project cost of $1.37 million. The funding sources for this are split between the Airline Cost Center and the Port Cost Center. Through the HGAC buy, they do not have any small business vendors, as well as the small business program within the port performed an analysis to determine there was no certified small businesses that sell fire apparatus in our area. Therefore, no small business participation goal was established for this procurement. We recommend the Executive Director's recommendation to approve a contract to Hughes Fire Equipment in the amount of approximately $843,000.
Thank you. I have a question. Just given the longevity of the of this equipment, you're thinking 12 years and then 12 additional years. Wonder if you feel like you're getting what you need. I'm thinking particularly wildfire danger seems to be increasing, and we'll have a long-term piece of equipment here. Is it what you need given the amount of time you'll have it? Is really my question.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I think it meets our needs well. Our actual challenge for apparatus is more in the number. Suddenly, we're sending apparatus out away from the port to assist in the West, like many fire departments, communities that are up against some serious things. And so we lose an apparatus effectively when we do that for, it could be 10, 12, 14 days. And, so one of the things we're looking at was how do we backfill that? So we have the reserve, so we have to have a solid reserve apparatus, but we're even at this moment looking at possibly keeping the reserve that we would retire. But our challenge is, it's already coming up to its service life. So is that going to be an appropriate apparatus for us to even keep around? One of the ways that we've solved that problem is we've reached out to our neighbors, the City of Portland, City of Gresham. City of Gresham has already loaned us an apparatus on one occasion, and the City of Portland is going to council with a resolution to essentially automate that request process for the city so that if we call, we can get an apparatus. But as far as the apparatus itself and what we're called to do by the state of Oregon or by EMAC when the emergency management folks activate us out of state, it's the appropriate apparatus because largely our mission stays structural. Even though we're in the, what they call the urban interface environment, our mission is to protect structures most of the time. And that's what we do because that's what our apparatus is best suited for and our training lends towards.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I did have one. First, a comment. We don't want to miss the opportunity to thank you and your team for the support that you provide to this airport and to the community. We deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
You mentioned that there were roughly almost 1,200 calls last year, and I'm assuming those were both structural and EMS, I'm going to say health-related or trauma-related. Is this vehicle the primary vehicle to respond to both of those, or do you have... I've always been interested when I see a fire truck pull up when somebody's had a heart attack, and sort of the equipment and sort of, I understand it's the same staff, but in some instances it seems a lot of equipment knowing that this is a health-related issue. And I know there's a rationale for it, and if you would take a minute and explain it to me, it would be...
No, I'd be happy. I've been at this 32 years and worked for a number of different agencies, and I would tell you that it is not our primary apparatus. It is our primary structural apparatus. We run a rescue. Two-person looks more like an ambulance that runs... we have a total of 2,800 responses out of the fire department, and that engine takes roughly 1,200 of them. So the rescue takes a lot of the medical calls, which is a smaller staffed unit. But interestingly, if the call is serious, we send both. So for example, a cardiac arrest is an all hands. It takes an enormous amount of people to run a cardiac arrest and to defibrillate and give drugs and establish airways and such. And so sometimes why you see the crowd out on the street is because it may be a serious level call. We want to make sure we front load to give the person the greatest opportunity, for recovery. And sometimes we're guessing. Sometimes we get there with the Army and there's not a lot there. It's a minor call, and it just came in as something more serious. But we carry, a whole variety of apparatus that are over at the fire department. Some specialized for the aircraft, some for medical, some for structural, some for mass casualty. So, and I would also, invite any of you if you'd like to come over for a tour of the department. We'd be happy to share it and show it with you.
Thank you. Please.
Madam President, this is Commissioner McDonald. I had a question.
Please go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. First, I would also like to thank you, Chief, for your leadership and service, especially across the West Coast. I am wondering, with the extended life, the long life of the engines, what accommodations or adaptability is there within the engine for technology advances over the next 2 decades? Are those taken into consideration?
I may ask a clarification. Would that be to adapt to the existing engine to advances in technology, or more of a planning process to, for the next engine we purchase to make sure it's keeping up with technology?
I was thinking, that's a good point. I was thinking, is there capability to adapt the current engine given the pace of technology advances?
Well, that's a good question. It actually is a challenge because once the apparatus are spec'd and built, we're operating off of what is the latest technology in the industry at the moment. And of course, as we all know, things move very quickly. Some things can upgrade along with the apparatus. An example, that might be like LED lighting, which didn't exist very long ago and is now really prevalent and is far superior. We can make additions to an existing apparatus for things like that, where other things like, crash avoidance or something like that, we won't have access to probably until we buy the next apparatus. So I would say a little bit of a mixed bag on what's available that we can upgrade and what we might have to wait for till we rotate our next apparatus to reserve.
Thank you.
Chief, I've been associated with the port firefighters since 1989 in a number of different roles. And I think it's really important to note that you are a multifaceted department: water rescue, structural, aircraft, and highly trained for what you do. And I'm really proud that I think you're one of the best port fire departments in the country, and we need to recognize that. I also want to make a motion in support of the purchase.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Vince, I think you have the next agenda item as well.
Yes, we have a public improvement contract here for art for the terminal balancing project, Concourse E, as Curtis talked about a little bit earlier. It's coming together, and so we're getting down to the levels of detail here. And so we have a recommendation for 2 hanging art pieces, and Carl Schultz is here, and he's going to walk you through the details.
Good morning. My name is Carl Schultz. I'm with the NISI Group, and I'm providing temporary capacity for project engineering for the port. Today, we're seeking and presenting the art public improvements contract for 2 hanging art pieces with the superabundant atmosphere and the artist for the terminal balancing project in the amount of $590,000. I think you're all familiar with the concourse expansion. It's obviously located at the north end, northeast end, and part of E. And this is and as we have discussed, the design team with part of this selection process of picking the art locations for this project. So the port contracted with the Regional Arts Council, or RAC, and I'll use that terminology, to facilitate the process. They were part of the coordination of the steps of the selection. They set up a committee of 7 voting members, 3 with port staff. 3 of the members were port staff. The committee identified and documented desired goals of the project to allow the artist to present in the RFQ process the type of art needed for that location. Again, with the port working with RAC, the RAC was able to send out an RFQ process where they had over 283 applicants, which is a very large number, as you can imagine. The team worked with the committee to reduce the number of artists being presented down to about 30. And the committee reviewed those 30 artists and reduced that to 4 finalists. The 4 finalists were allowed to provide on-site tours of the complex or the port, and the interviews took place on 3/8, and they selected one artist, which we are asking for approval today, which was Superabundant Atmosphere. So just to refamiliarize yourself with the location, these are the architect's rendering of the nodes for the concourse. And there's 2 locations. This is the concession node, and this is the second node area where the art sculptures will be located. The project delivery of the art is within the guidelines of the project, with the installation to be taking place in the second quarter of 2020. The budget for this contracting of the artist was already incorporated in the project master budget, and the involvement of this project does not have really any impact to the small business enterprise goals due to the small size of this project compared to the overall numbers for the project. So here's our artists. These are existing completed art pieces that they've done. The first one is McDonald's World Headquarters, and the artist's concept is utilizing small kites that he's been influenced by in his life, and they're basically about 8 to 12 inches. And part of this piece is adding color and different texture in those kites and facilitating this 3-dimensional imagery that you can see. Color and using white and clear kites also add to the complexity of the art piece. The second one is the Royal Caribbean cruise ship that they actually were commissioned to provide this piece. That did come with some excitement since the boat rocks and the art rocks. So they had to do some things, and it's a very fun story, but they really did work hard with the client, Royal Caribbean, to make sure that the piece was stabilized, easy to clean and manage. These are all concerns for the port. So as you can see, a more detailed outline of what the kites look like. They're suspended from the ceiling systems, and again, they can integrate either color, graphics, or clear so that light transfers differently through the art piece. This is the conceptual first sketch of hand sketch of what the piece will look like in a 3-dimensional view, so to speak, where you can see it suspended in the concourse. But here's a more detailed design that they're currently working on. The design will evolve, but they can speak more, they can express what the concepts are, but there are 2 different types of responses to the 2 different nodes. One being over concessions will be over concession structures, so they're going to do something slightly different than the one over the seating areas. But in the end, the committee found their work to be very exciting, and it really will look very spectacular in this space, providing color and 3-dimensional involvement in that space, making it just not a linear, but you can enjoy the ceiling as well as the space below. And here's the other version. So I'm here again to request your approval of the personal service agreement contract with Superabundant Atmosphere in the amount of $590,000.
Thank you. Any questions or yes?
Thank you very much. Just educate me, please. In terms of a price tag, $590. It's not $59,000. $590,000. Is it not?
It is. Sorry.
That's for 2 pieces with the artwork as proposed.
Yes.
Right. Where does the price tag $590 derive from? Like from artist time spent to create that? That means his labor, this and that. Where does it come from? Just educate us.
Yes, there's 2 parts of it. One is that the port establishes a budget based on history. For example, this building, we have multiple public art pieces that we use as a milestone or a matrix to figure out what the budget rates are for art. So the port has established these budgets related to where the locations are. Secondary, it's the proposed amounts are reviewed with RAC, the Regional Art Council, who has done hundreds of public art pieces. And so they're very in tune with the value that you will receive from artists for the project, any type of project, whether it's two-dimensional or three-dimensional. Finally, the artists present their piece and the value is established. They know how much their budget is, and so they're trying to maximize their presentation to get the most in the presentation for the value. So they know that if they put one kite and one stick, that you as a good buyer will not buy one kite. But if you see a density that they are proposing, the committee is smart enough to know that that is a value for that art. So I hope that answered that question.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll call for a motion and second to accept the executive director's recommendation. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. Vince.
Our last item here is approval to award a construction contract for a breasting dolphin fender and rub rail rehab project. This is at berth 601 at Terminal 6. And berth 601 is actually the auto portion of the Terminal 6. We always talk about containers and such, but there's actually quite a bit of auto work that goes on out there. And this is used to load and unload cars. We're exporting Fords and importing Hyundais here. And so Marcel is here to talk through the details of the project and ask for your approval.
Yeah. Thanks, Vince, and good morning. As Vince said, I'm here to request approval to award a construction contract for berth 601 breasting dolphin fender and rub rail rehabilitation project in the amount of $1,272,987. Berth 601 is located at the western end of Terminal 6 on the Columbia River, just upstream from the confluence with the Willamette River. Berth 601 is currently being used for the imports of Hyundai and exports of Ford by Odo Warehousing Company. This project will construct a new breasting dolphin, will replace worn-out rub rail, and will address damage to fender piles through a mix of repairs and replacement of the damaged piles. On this slide, you can see an existing breasting dolphin, as well as the existing worn-out rub rail on the vessel side of the berth. The wooden rub rail will be replaced by more durable plastic lumber. Here you can see the project schedule. Construction is scheduled to be performed between early October and the end of January. While most of the work is not subject to in-water work window, restrictions do apply to the pile driving work, which is only allowed within a 2-month period. Shown on this slide, overall project budget is $2.45 million, which includes $377,000 of contingency. This is 18% of the total project budget and is considered reasonable given the risk profile of the project. The Port's Small Business Program performed a goal analysis and determined there are no certified small businesses in this region who perform marine construction, so therefore no SBE goal was set on this project. And with that, staff recommends your approval of the Executive Director's recommendation.
Thank you. Any questions?
One quick question. I can understand that there are no small businesses that perform this work, but are there downstream workflows, hauling, removal, that would lend itself to a small subcontractor who would be a minority contractor?
There is very limited work within the scope that would be suitable for that, in large part because it's working on the water. So they would still work on the water from the barges. So.
Okay. Well, and again, I'm supportive of it. I encourage sort of creative thinking about ways in which some of this can be unpacked in ways that don't tie into a specific target, but encourage the engagement of smaller contractors.
Right.
I would encourage that.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you for hanging out with us.